Hello, and thank you for watching. My name is Bradford Roberts, Principal Broker, Founder, and Owner of TR Realty in the Las Vegas area. After watching this video, please be sure to like it as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. Download the pertinent handouts for this video by clicking the link in the comments below. Now let's get started. Some people think that Class 6 is the most complicated of any of my classes. There will be numerous new words, phrases, and acronyms. I strongly encourage you to take very detailed and thorough notes as you watch my Class 6 video series. A perfectly executed short sale is like solving a Rubik's Cube, and most agents have very little experience with short sales and no clue about how to do them correctly. If you don't know what you're doing and you allow your seller's property to go into foreclosure, you're actually doing exactly the opposite of what you were hired to do. And the potential for liability is very high. Short sales are time-consuming. They're difficult. They're stressful. But is that a deterrent to you, or is that an opportunity for you? If you think short sales are too complicated for you, then possibly real estate is too complicated for you. You know, the National Association of Realtors says nationwide that the success rate with short sales is less than 20%. That might surprise you. The success rate at TR Realty is in excess of 80%. And my own personal success rate with short sales is in excess of 95%. Why so high? Stay tuned and find out. In a short sale, the seller is often your number one enemy and the reason that you are not able to successfully close the transaction. So you should be able to talk intelligently about short sales, and you should be able to talk about the differences between short sales and foreclosures. Why not just walk away from the property, right? So let's talk about some of the pluses and minuses. In a short sale situation, someone should be able to obtain another mortgage somewhere between 2 and 4 years out. And in a short sale situation, the average FICO score drop is around 100 points or so. But in a foreclosure, it could easily take 7 years to obtain a new mortgage, and the average drop in a FICO score is around 250 points. We won't even talk about the intangible components of doing a short sale versus a foreclosure, things like dignity, things like embarrassment in front of the neighbors, things like your stress level, etc. So we definitely want to do a short sale as opposed to allowing our property to go through foreclosure. Now, why would somebody even buy a short sale? We know that it takes a ton of time and it's a very difficult process. Well, there's primarily two reasons that someone would even consider buying one. One is when the inventory in the market is very tight. Simply, not enough properties on the market, you may have to settle for buying one that is in a short sale situation. And the second primary reason why buyers are interested in short sales is the perception, I said perception, of getting a better deal, paying a lower price. Short sales were very common in Nevada from 2007 through about 2013, and they're still around today. In fact, they might be coming back strong. As we film this video, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are artificially propping up the market right now with things like an eviction moratorium and forbearance programs from the lenders. You know, a lot of people don't understand or care what a forbearance program is. They think maybe it's some sort of forgiveness, when in fact it's not. All you're doing is delaying the process of making those payments. So when that forbearance program comes to an end, and suddenly you're facing the prospect of having to pay many, many mortgage payments at the same time, as you can figure out, folks, a lot of people are not going to be able to do that. And if you can't make your mortgage payments, what do you think is going to happen to the property? So short sales are going to be coming back. Foreclosures are going to be coming back. The only question is to what degree. And let me be very clear that although short sales have been pretty common in Nevada since about 2007, Doing one as a real estate professional is not any easier now than it was before. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of short sales. When short sales came into fashion around 2007 in Nevada, the first thing that happened was known as mortgage resets. And we use the word reset to talk about the interest rates that were changing. So in other words, somebody got into a mortgage product with a certain interest rate, but that interest rate was going up after that. And that comes from the fact that lenders and Wall Street came up with all kinds of exotic loan products at the time. And these loan products were designed to make it easier, to make it more affordable for people to get into houses. It certainly did nothing to keep them in those houses once they were in. And at that time, people were buying houses they couldn't afford. The market was absolutely going crazy. And people were stretched out. They were getting 100%, in some cases 103% financing. That's right. People were borrowing more than the property was even worth. So they had very little skin in the game. There were interest-only products. There were other loan products known as neg-am products. Neg-am stands for negative amortization. So when we amortize a loan, traditionally, correctly, we are actually making a monthly payment that satisfies all of the interest as well as chipping away at the principal. A negative amortization creates a monthly payment that is so low, it's actually not even covering the amount of the interest. So if you are making a payment that doesn't even cover the amount of the interest, what happens with the unpaid interest is next month it gets tacked on to the principal. So you actually make your mortgage payment and next month you owe more than you owed the month before. That is pretty crazy. I think a lot of us would agree with that. But that would keep that payment artificially low and again allow someone to get into a house that they couldn't normally afford. In fact, at that time, there were so many exotic loan products that lenders would often give the homeowner a choice of 3 different amounts that they could pay on their mortgage statement. So think about this, folks. If you got a statement in the mail and it said you could pay $1,500, you could pay $1,700, or you could pay $2,200. Which number do you think most people would choose? And in many cases, the lowest number was a payment based on negative amortization. The middle payment was based on an interest-only loan, so you're satisfying the interest component of your note, but you're not paying anything toward the principal. And the highest number was typically a fully amortized payment, which is a mortgage as most of us know it to be. So people were getting further and further behind. These loan products were even getting more exotic than that. In some cases, lenders were approving people to get a mortgage based on a teaser rate. Have you ever gotten in the mail a credit card solicitation and it said, your first 3 months or your first 6 months, something like that, the interest rate is only 1.9% or something like that? That's known as a teaser rate. So that is a way of getting you in. You transfer your balance over to that credit card company. You enjoy that low interest rate for a very short period of time. And all of a sudden, that interest rate skyrockets. Well, folks, when you owe money and you're paying interest on that money, if the interest rate goes up, what happens to the payment? What happens to the debt? What happens to affordability? And lenders were approving people based on their ability to make the payment at the teaser rate. So 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, what have you, when that interest rate adjusted, or reset is another way to say that, the payment went up. When the payment went up, it became more difficult for people to afford that payment, and that led to short sales. So that term, mortgage reset, definitely does a very good job of describing the first wave of short sales that we experienced in Nevada. The second evolution, the second wave of short sales has to do with unemployment. Now, before we got into short sales, Nevada, and specifically Las Vegas, had some of the lowest unemployment numbers in the entire country. In fact, the unemployment rate was so low in Nevada that it was considered above full unemployment. I'm not an economist. I can't get into the nuances of what full employment is. My understanding of full employment is that there's always going to be some people who are between jobs or some people who are leaving their jobs voluntarily. So the unemployment rate could never be truly zero. There's always some churn, some turnover in employment. So there's a number, and I believe it to be about 5%, that economists would consider that to be full employment at that point. Well, in Nevada, our employment rate was lower than that. It was over full employment. Well, what happened when these mortgage resets started to affect the economy, right? People couldn't make their mortgage payment, so now they're spending less in a casino. They're going out to eat less often. They're going to the movies less often. They're delaying the purchase of some new furniture. Trickle down. All of a sudden, the economy started to slow, and a lot of employers in Nevada started to let people go. It is that unemployment situation that was the second wave of short sales. And we actually went in Nevada from the lowest unemployment rate in the country to the highest unemployment rate in the country, as it came very, very close to a 15% unemployment rate. As we film this video today, we are going through this unbelievable pandemic. And, layoffs are huge and a lot of people are not working. Maybe 15% doesn't sound so bad. But at the time, to swing that pendulum, as Nevada typically does, from a super, super low unemployment rate to an incredibly high unemployment rate, it did cause a massive jolt in the marketplace, hence the second wave of short sales. And then after the employment situation started to stabilize a bit, so many people had gone through short sales and foreclosures in Nevada that a third wave developed in the evolution of short sales, and that is known as strategic defaults. Now, if you think about the term strategic default, it comes from the fact that somebody is able to make that mortgage payment, but they're choosing not to. So it is their strategy to default on that mortgage payment. Most of the time that people stopped making their mortgage payment, even when they could afford it, was because of what they were witnessing around their neighborhood. They saw the guy across the street buy a house at foreclosure for 50 cents on the dollar. They saw a guy down the street go through the same thing. And people started to realize, my God, I owe more money on my mortgage than other people are buying houses for in my neighborhood. This is not fair. It's going to take me an awful long time to pay down my mortgage to get to where current values are in my neighborhood right now. So screw it. I'm not going to make that mortgage payment. I could, but I'm choosing not to. Hence the term strategic defaults, the third wave of short sales in our market. And in fact, today as we record this video, most short sales that are still going on would be in that strategic default category. Although, here comes the unemployment, and we could be reversing and going back. There's not a lot of mortgage resets anymore, but we could easily, and in my opinion, we will be going back to short sales due to an unemployment problem. So short sales are way off their peak, but they're going to be around for a while, and I do predict that they will be bouncing back. In fact, deficiencies are up in 2020. And what happens when all these mortgage forbearance programs start to come to an end? What happens when the eviction moratorium comes to an end? Right now, the market is going pretty good, but in my opinion, it is being artificially propped up by these forbearance programs. And what do you think is going to happen when somebody is nearing the end of a forbearance program with their lender, and all of a sudden they have to come up with 4, 6, 8 mortgage payments or more at the same time? Do you think the average guy on the street will be able to do that? Or do you think he's going to be in some financial distress? And when we're in financial distress because of our property, that's how short sales and foreclosures happen. And I just want to mention that at one point in the Nevada market, short sales peaked at about 45% of our transactions. So pretty near half of all the residential transactions were short sales at one point. Where are we today? We're down to about 2% of our transactions. So a pretty low number of short sales going on right now. But I do predict as we roll into the winter and the calendar turns to 2021 that we could be seeing quite a significant number of short sales coming on the market. And actually, Nevada was number one in the United States for a long time for the number of foreclosures. We had to do something about it. And that leads me to a discussion of AB 284. Whenever you hear AB, that stands for Assembly Bill. Now, I'm not here to teach a civics class. Most of you know on a federal level, we have something called Congress, right? And Congress consists of two houses. The upper house, which is the Senate, and the lower house, which is the House of Representatives. The Senate is considered the higher house because every state only has a couple of senators versus the House of Representatives where it's based on population. So the Senate is considered the higher house. Now, on a state level in Nevada, we have something that mirrors that. We do have a state Senate here, our higher house of government, of state Congress. And then our lower house, which is tantamount to the House of Representatives, but actually in Nevada, we call it the Assembly. So again, whenever you hear AB, it stands for an Assembly bill telling you that the bill was generated and comes from the Assembly, if you will. So I want to talk about AB 284, which was nicknamed the robo-signing law, robo coming from the word robot. For you to understand why Nevada implemented a robo-signing law, you first need to understand what robo-signing is or was. Well, Nevada is a very investor-friendly state. And because we're investor-friendly, very different than California, by the way, we are a non-judicial foreclosure state. In case you don't know, non-judicial versus judicial foreclosure, we will be talking about that later in this video series. But a non-judicial foreclosure process allows a lender to foreclose quicker and simpler and cheaper than they would have to do in a state like California or New York as another example. So we already swung the pendulum in Nevada because of the mortgage resets and because of the unemployment situation that I was just talking about. But here in Nevada, where we tend to swing the pendulum in both directions much more than most other places do, we actually had a situation where lenders were taking advantage of our laws here, and they were ramming foreclosures through the system, through the non-judicial foreclosure system, that even with our loose regulations for foreclosure, they were still violating our laws. They were foreclosing on properties improperly. And in some cases, the big lenders, and when I say the big lenders, I'm talking about almost all the names you know. When you drive down the street, you see their branches, okay, all those big guys. A lot of them were hiring third-party companies to do what's known as robo-signing. Now, a lender is supposed to have personal knowledge of a foreclosure. They're supposed to be able to claim ownership of the debt. They're supposed to have their records in order, etc. And in many cases, when they did not have those things in place, they were still ramming the foreclosures through, exacerbating an already terrible problem and making it just an absolute disaster in the state of Nevada. So in Nevada, we decided that we just cannot accept the banks coming in, taking advantage of us, kicking us when we're already down. We need to do something about it. And October 1st of 2011, AB 284 came into effect, the robo-signing law. Now, how did that affect our market, you might wonder? So keep in mind the date, October 1st, 2011 is when that law came to be. Let's look at the month immediately preceding that. So that would be September 2011. In the month of September 2011, there were 4,600 foreclosure starts in Nevada. And we say foreclosure start, we typically refer to that another way as a notice of default. It could also be a summons and complaint. We'll talk about that a bit later, but most of them are notices of default. So in September, 4,600 of them. The very first month that this law came to be, the number changed a little bit from 4,600 to 80. Yup, 80. So what does that tell you about the way the banks were processing foreclosures in Nevada? Do you think they were following the rules? Because what happened was the implementation of AB 284 created criminal penalties for a lender. Yeah, criminal penalties for a lender who rammed a foreclosure through the system improperly. Yeah, literally someone could go to jail for an improper foreclosure. So all of a sudden, when we were looking at foreclosures under a microscope in Nevada, the number dropped precipitously, and guess what started to happen? We started to find a footing in the market. And now, we weren't facing a wave, a tsunami of foreclosed properties coming on the market, bringing prices down 40, 50, close to 70% in some zip codes in Nevada. Now, when banks were forced to do them correctly or face criminal penalties, that tsunami came to an end and we had a trickle. And of course, supply and demand, right? So when there's fewer foreclosures being dumped on the market, they're able to be absorbed more easily. That stabilizes the market. It stabilizes the prices. And for those of you who'd like to do some research, go check out how the implementation, the timing of the implementation of AB 284 was extremely closely related to ending our drop in prices, the beginning of stabilization, and subsequently prices starting to go back up in Nevada. There are 7 primary reasons why a lender will even consider doing a short sale. Yes, consider, because lenders are under no obligation whatsoever to actually do a short sale. They have every right to say, no, we're not interested in doing a short sale on this property, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. So let's talk about the 7 primary reasons why a lender might consider a short sale. Number 1 is an interest rate increase. So we've already talked today about some of the exotic loan products and that sort of thing. If someone is facing an adjustment in their interest rate, and that interest rate is going up, their payment then goes up, makes the home less affordable. So there's not a lot of those exotic loan products or adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs, left out there, although they're starting to come back a little bit right now. But in the event of an interest rate increase, it is likely that the lender will consider doing a short sale. The second primary reason is job loss. And when we talk about job loss, that would actually include many things, not just simply being fired, but being furloughed, being demoted, having your salary reduced, eliminating overtime, a diminution of the number of hours, changing from full-time to part-time, all kinds of things like that. And it could be anyone in the household who is subject to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mortgage holder or the person who is named on the deed. It could be anyone in the household who's contributing to the monthly income. So job loss would be the second reason. The third reason is an involuntary move. So let's say somebody works for a company that may transfer them to another city. If you want to keep your job, you're now working in a different city across the country somewhere. So in that situation, it's not just someone making a decision that they want to get up and move. It's someone who's moving because they need to do so to keep their job. And there are other reasons why someone may have an involuntary move. child custody issues, etc. But if someone is being forced to move and it's not their choice, that's considered an involuntary move, and that would be the third primary reason for a lender to consider a short sale. The fourth primary reason would be military service. If somebody is called to active duty and they have to leave their home area for whatever reason, perhaps they're being called to serve in another country or whatever, military service is a great reason to do a short sale and is one that lenders don't question a whole lot. Number 5 on the list is divorce. So a couple of things to mention about divorce. You've got the obvious one, which is when two people get divorced, typically one of them leaves the property. And when they leave the property, they take their income with them, right? So now all of a sudden you've got one person trying to swing that mortgage payment on his or her own, makes it more difficult, makes it more likely that they're going to end up defaulting. But another component of divorce is a psychological one, an emotional one, if you will, where in many cases people buy a house together. Often two people will go house shopping and set up their home. And now that that relationship has sadly come to an end, they don't feel the same way about that property anymore. Just too many memories and just too many ill feelings to come home every night. So there's a lot of things in divorce that are intangible, but divorce is in fact one of the 7 primary reasons a lender might consider a short sale. There's even, believe it or not, something known as strategic divorce, where if somebody doesn't fall into one of the other categories that we've talked about, an involuntary move, military service, and the ones we're about to talk about, etc., if they don't fall into one of those categories, a couple might choose, and keep in mind this is not an ethics class, it's a real estate class, but they might choose to get divorced just so they are now satisfying one of the 7 primary reasons to do a short sale. Again, I'm not talking about the ethical component of that, I'm just telling you that is a reality. Some people strategically divorce just to qualify for a short sale. Reason number 6 on my list is medical reasons. So if somebody in the household, tragically suffers from cancer, heart attack, stroke, those kinds of things can happen, and maybe now even the coronavirus as well. All kinds of things can happen, even if it's not somebody who is responsible for the mortgage or on the deed. They could end up, someone could end up being a caretaker. It could affect the income for the house. There could be all kinds of medical expenses that ensue. So medical reasons are one of the primary reasons for doing a short sale. And closely tied to that would be reason number 7, which is death. And death is similar to divorce, meaning that there's a psychological, emotional component to that as well. Could be the death of anyone in the household. Doesn't have to be someone who's contributing to the income, but for a lot of people, it does change the dynamics in the home. It does change the way we feel about the home. In many cases, we don't even want to be in the home anymore. So death is reason number 7 on my list. So from the top, the 7 primary reasons would be an interest rate increase, job loss, an involuntary move, military service, divorce, medical reasons, or the death of someone in the household. And if your seller does not fall into one of those 7 categories, it is going to be more difficult to get a short sale approved. Short sales were traditionally limited to primary residences, but over the years, some lenders started to show some leniency for investment properties, specifically for investment properties where they were not collecting any rental income. So obviously logic would tell you if you've got an investment property and the tenant is paying the rent but you're not paying the mortgage, the lender is probably not going to look too favorably upon doing a short sale in that situation, right? So if it's an investment property and it is not generating rental income, it still may qualify for a short sale in that case. Okay, we've been going for quite a while here. We've been talking about short sales. I've used the term many, many times thus far. But what is a short sale? Let's really get into the definition of a short sale. You have to understand exactly what it means. And real estate professionals throw this term around. They kind of sort of maybe have some idea of what a short sale is, but you really need to get the definition. And you need to understand that the term short sale is not a real estate term at all. In fact, it comes from Wall Street. It comes from the financial world of selling stocks or other investments short by design. So let me give you a working definition of exactly what a short sale is. Listen carefully. A short sale is when the net proceeds after all fees and expenses are not sufficient to cover the payoff of existing mortgages and other liens, and the seller is unable or unwilling to cover the difference. We got to do that again. You got to hear it all. There's a reason for every word in that definition. When the net proceeds after all fees and expenses are not sufficient to cover the payoff of existing mortgages and other liens, and the seller is unable or unwilling to cover the difference. There's another way of referring to this. Sometimes you hear the term that the homeowner is underwater. Okay, that's another way, a short way of saying the seller might be facing a short sale. And the tipping point for sellers is, on average, about 40% negative equity. A lot of people can tolerate if their house is currently valued for a little bit less than they owe on it. But when we get to the point that the house is worth about 40% less than someone owes on it, that is about the tipping point for most people, according to extensive research that has been done on this topic. A short sale is a glorified collection. You understand? A short sale is a collection, and it is tedious and it is complicated by design. And as a real estate professional, your seller will often come to you and say, hey, I'm still getting these calls. I'm still getting certified letters from the lender. What's going on? I thought we're doing a short sale. Okay, let me say it again. A short sale is a collection. It's a glorified collection. And during the short sale process, the collection activity is going to continue, and the real estate agent cannot make it stop. Understand that a short sale, by definition and by design, cannot leave any profit for the seller at all. In fact, it has to net out at zero. And if there are any leftover funds at all, okay, even a nickel when we do our final calculations and we do our prorations, if there's any money left over at closing whatsoever, it's going to go to the first lien holder. It is not going to go to the seller. The seller cannot profit from a short sale at all. In fact, let's take that a step further. By definition, a short sale creates what's called a deficiency. And let's make sure we get a good working definition of the term deficiency, because I'm going to be using it many more times throughout this video series. The deficiency is the amount of the lender's loss. The deficiency is the amount of the lender's loss. And you're going to need to calculate that deficiency. Of course, you can get some help from the title company. So let's talk about how to calculate a deficiency. The deficiency is the sale price minus the expenses such as commission and title fees, minus any other liens that might be owed on the property, and that's going to give us something called the net proceeds. You might remember the term a minute ago, net proceeds, part of my definition of a short sale. So now that we know how to calculate the net proceeds, the balance owed on the mortgage minus the net proceeds equals the deficiency. I know that was a lot, so let's go through that one more time. Write it down, folks, so you understand it. From the beginning, a short sale creates a deficiency. A deficiency is another way of saying the amount of the lender's loss. Let's calculate the lender's loss. Sale price minus expenses, including commission and title fees, minus any other liens that might be owed on the property, equal the net proceeds. Now we take the balance owed on the mortgage minus the net proceeds, and that equals our deficiency. I would like to thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative for you. If you are licensed with another brokerage in Southern Nevada and would like to talk with me, please text me or visit our website. See you next time.